I didn't set out to become an advocate for regulation. Like many educators and practitioners, I simply wanted to do things correctly, to teach responsibly, and to protect clients. And honestly, operate within systems that made sense for a procedure involving skin penetration and electricity and infection risk. What I learned along the way is that when education is structured, accountable, and safety-driven, it doesn't limit a profession, it elevates it. I'm in the process of doing that for my home state because I live in an unlicensed state. And my friend, Eileen here, is the guest of honor, and she's lived this reality. She's worked through both a nursing board oversight, higher education approval, operating in a framework that treats electrology as a health-adjacent care rather than an informal trade instruction. That experience is giving her a perspective that most people never get to see. It's something that becomes especially important when we talk about the unregulated states like where I'm at now in Washington State and where I started off in Arizona State. Today's conversation isn't about jumping straight into licensure. It's about minimum standards, educator accountability, infection control, access to education, and why regulation done thoughtfully is often the one thing that makes affordability and legitimacy possible. This conversation is not about defining the profession before somebody else defines it for us. Without further ado, I take you to Eileen and myself's conversation about electrology and the future of education. All right, so I wanted to talk to Eileen about something that is very important for me right now because I am in an unlicensed state and I'm from an unlicensed state. And I own a school in an unlicensed state, but I'm a licensed electrologist now for the first time, 1 year in, after 20 years of being at this. And I'm changing the way it needs to happen here in my state because there's regulations, but there's no licensure. So we need to talk about this because you have been hard at work. So Eileen, welcome to the conversation again. Thanks for being back.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me again.
Absolutely. This conversation, so Eileen and I met in 2013. The only reason I even remember these dates, just so you know, is because I met you when I became a board member for the organization that we were both board members for. You were for a state, and I was the, not unlicensed, the unaffiliated delegate at large at that time. And I wouldn't say new to electrology. I'd been at it for a minute, but I was new to certification because I'd only been certified for a couple years at that point. And I also knew that I wanted to get into a space where I was teaching electrologists because my state had lost schools when the big dark happened for the electrology industry in the early 2000s, okay? And you and Deb, literally, I was there and you guys like scooped me up and you're like, not this one. She's going to be with us, right? And you guys started really helping me nurture the side of the advocate and educator that I knew was there and I knew I could tap into, but I didn't know if other people would see it. So that's a huge thing for me, as I think that's a stepping stone in my career that helped get me to be like the ZEP master for myself, was understand that other people could also see that it was that important to me. Today's conversation, we're really going to talk about like defining electrology, I would say as health adjacent, because you and I really are passionate about that. Education governed professional, like we need to make sure that there's oversight within us, just like in our research project in the IRB that we've been looking at, the same kind of concept there. So I wanted to start with, you have been working directly with the Maryland Board of Nursing and the Maryland Higher Education Commission.
Yes.
What does that dual oversight matter for how electrology is defined in your state?
Well, to get the school opened, I had to get my curriculum approved by the state board first. Once that happened, then I could apply to open a private career school through the Maryland Higher Education Commission. Initially, there was a little bit of confusion, and I thought I had to do that through Maryland Higher Education Commission, but because they would have to hire out an expert to actually review the curriculum, and we already have experts in Maryland. So that's what they told me I needed to do. It did take quite a while. The curriculum, I had to print everything out. There were Dropbox file after Dropbox file after Dropbox file. There were a lot of questions that they had to ask me. There were, I had to submit every test that I could potentially give a student, the practical assessment forms, all of them, lesson plans, everything. They had to review every single thing from start to finish. And that includes having access to the online curriculum. I'm a Dectro school, so I used their online curriculum. So they needed to have access to all of that as well in order for it to be approved. Once approved, then I still had to submit all of that with the application for Maryland Higher Education Commission. With that, once I got to a certain level within the approval process of Maryland Higher Education Commission, I actually had to. Now, this is a little scary, and most business people in the on the chat on the call here are going to say, "Are you crazy?"
Yep.
But they required me to sign a lease and fully outfit the space before they approved me.
Yeah.
So it was a huge financial risk on my part. I reached out to a couple of legislators whom I know, who assured me that this is how it works. And, I'm not the first one that this has happened to. And the fact that they felt that I was going to be approved, but they couldn't, tell me for sure I was going to be approved until after it was all over. I just had to follow all the steps. And that was one of the steps. Thankfully, I had a landlord that worked with me, and he gave me, a grace period of basically 9 months where I didn't have to pay him rent.
Oh, nice.
Thank God, because that would have, really, really put a hurting on me. But finally, I eventually opened, and then I was able to begin taking students on, and I've had 14 go completely through the program. I have another 7 in the works, and I have room for a few more to come in, and I'm just trying to rotate them through to keep the doors open.
Yeah.
But it's in this whole, we talked a little bit about proof of concept. So you really have to create the package, and they need to be able to see that this is not a fly-by-night situation. You see in the news now where are these daycares or whatever, they're getting money and they're not even operating. Well, that our state has rules where this doesn't happen. So, by putting everything together in advance, and having them have it on file, and then the Maryland Higher Education Commission keeps all this stuff forever. So if and when I ever close, then my students will always have a source to get transcripts or to get a diploma or to get whatever, if for some crazy reason my school ends up closing, which not going to happen anytime soon.
You're like, I've already put the work in. Thank you very much.
Right.
I'm glad to hear that this is actually, because you and I've talked briefly about the opening of the schools. It's wild because when I decided to move to Washington State, it was a split decision. And it was and I'm going to be honest, when people hear this, it was a political decision based on stuff that was happening in my state. That I made a decision. I don't want to go into that because honestly, it's not something I want to relive right now. But I was already in the works of creating the framework within Arizona, and we had lost our schools when we joked right before y'all got on here. I forgot how I worded it. I was like the big dark or whatever it was. But when I became an electrologist, my mom, a couple years before then, had just she had unfortunately we had lost our state association. The schools decided that they didn't want to continue if there was nobody to back continued education. if there was nobody that was going to support technicians with the dual training of laser and electrolysis. And here I am at 2003, a brand new laser technician. And I was like, how do I make more money? And my mom's like, well, then fill up your time with electrolysis, right? And of course, like 18 years old and eager. And I was in school for education. I'm like, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to be a teacher, right? In my brain at the time. And I didn't realize what passion and what it could look like and that kind of stuff. And sometimes I tell my students, like, you have to sit with a decision and see all of its potential. Right? Like, it doesn't necessarily mean like I wasn't going to be a teacher. I just wasn't being the teacher I thought I was going to be. It was something that I had to rethink that. And because of that mindset of being a teacher, I knew that I could create curriculum. I knew that I could create a pathway. But I also knew that you can't, because there wasn't a pathway established anymore, I had to create validity to what I was saying.
Right.
And I started working on getting my school up and going while I was still in Arizona, thinking, oh, I'll just be a pathway for people because at the time, the state of Oregon had reached out to me in Arizona and they said, hey, we know that like everybody's telling this, that you're a place to go to train, and they really want to go and train with you. We want to approve your curriculum. And so even before I made that split decision, and it was like a wild time in my life, I still like was working on that prior too. So when I got here, and when you move a state, you have this time where my one of my girlfriends called it my broke bay era. She was like, this is like the time where you're gonna have to like pay on something that you don't have, like you're not making money off of yet. You have to buy, you have to furnish things, you have to show this. You have things that you have to pay for, like fees and insurances and all that kind of stuff that you're not actually getting to benefit from that. But you do it because regulation is there. The state of Washington, where I moved to, has regulation in place for electrolysis. The problem is they have nobody that knows about it, right? And so I had Oregon asking me to meet their standards. I had to reformat what my curriculum looked like to meet the standards of a licensed state. That was my my moment where I was like seeing what that core, what would we call that? Oh my gosh, Eileen, as an example, right? I had to be able to show what that looks like in states that it did work. I had to show what rules look like, and I had to show people what that was going to change into. And I still had to like pay the bills with a small family, like, and teenagers, like they're not cheap, you know? And I'm okay with that, but like, they're not. And so I had to do all those things. And so when we started talking about this, I was like, oh, Eileen knows you can get a state licensed. It's going to take some grit. When we talked about like right now, like Maryland, proof of concept, that was the word I was looking for. Right now, it functions as a proof of concept state where you're at. I'm weirdly in my school becoming a proof of concept with what an unlicensed state school can look like following licensed state curriculum, and what the people here that are practicing right now could go into. What do you think that Maryland is currently demonstrating that other states can learn from in this moment? Like, what do you think is like, if you were to pull out one thing that like, oh, we're not seeing this elsewhere, this is something that we could start with. What do you think that would be?
Well, I think a licensed educator. I mean, I had to get an instructor's license. I don't think every state does that.
No.
And you know, when I went to electrolysis school, I did 320 hours in 1993. It was 320 hours. So in order to get an instructor's license, I had to come current with the current regulation, which is 600 hours in Maryland. So I did the 180 hours at CEA with Joannie and Joanne, and then I did the train the trainer program, and that made up the bulk of my missing hours. Also during that time, I got my bachelor's in psychology, which, I mean, it was a bucket list thingy that I'd always wanted to finish doing. But I also believe that kind of helped me, you know, put me on a path to really understand the whole teaching aspect and like getting back into like education and seeing how the 21st century teaches people. Because, it had been quite a while since I had been in school. So,
Yeah.
you know,
It's so funny because I'm in the process of finishing up some of my stuff for my degree because I stopped my education degree altogether because when you start off in this industry, if you don't kind of like dive into it because it's such a repetitive industry,
mhm,
you it takes a while to get out of the red.
mhm,
And it takes a while to feel confident in that space. And I'm not like a takes a while kind of person.
right,
I wanted to be able to like see the fruits of my labor. So I think of that as like I'm going back and doing the same thing. I'm right now, I just started my aesthetics program. I've got 2 more classes of my associates to get into this next part of it. And it's like, I know I'm crazy. I know I do a lot of things. And when you guys ask, how does she do it all? I don't really know. Okay. I do it because I want to. And I know, Jueni, you feel the same way. Like, I'm like, I get a little head nod over there. We do it because we want to. We do it because we know that if not us, then who?
right.
Right.
Mhm,
Which kind of comes to the next part is like understanding like we have to create the standards because it didn't exist. Right.
right.
So understand that standards before licensure is a thing. So like you argue, like in the notes that you had sent me, you're like, these are things that I think about. I was like, talk to me about education. I was like so excited. I got like a 2-page document from her. I was like, yes, let's go. I did my training this morning. You said jumping straight to licensure often backfires. And I'm going to tell you right now, just last year when I was up in Canada for a beauty show, I had one of my state colleagues, and I know she didn't mean it. And I hope that when you listen to this, hon, I know you didn't. But she told me I would never go to your school, basically. And I tell everybody to steer clear of it because we shouldn't have to do this. And I was like, pause. Whoever told you I'm trying to shut you down is psycho. Okay. But it does backfire. People are thinking I'm coming with the state with my golden key that I've made up at Home Depot to lock them out of their livelihood. And that's not it. So what do we do next? Like, why is starting a minimum education and safety standard effective in this space? Because if it's going to backfire, how do we prepare for that hit? Support for today's episode for Electrolysis Unplugged comes from Zap Master Electrology, where education meets innovation. A licensed school, Zap Master offers 200-hour to 600-hour electrology programs and mentorship to help new professionals thrive. Through Zap Master distribution, electrologists can access trusted tools, loops, and supplies. Learn more at thezapmaster.com.
Yeah, you just have to, I think by just kind of like stepping back and looking at the bigger picture, and when you start going after the legislatures, because it takes years to get legislators on board. And if you can just do like little baby steps, like take this as a consumer protection situation, or just basically educational standards, not necessarily licensure, but we have the potential. When I say we, I mean the collective we.
Yeah.
Electrologists, if they're not trained properly, have the potential to harm the public.
Yeah.
And going into it that way, or looking at the health departments and going at it from an infection prevention standpoint. Again, with the mindset of keeping the public safety, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Licensure doesn't always have to be the first thing. And the times they have changed. And it takes big money. And we don't have that kind of money, to hire lobbyists to legislate all the states that don't have licensure.
Mm-hmm.
There's not enough money out there for that. And so where do we need to focus our efforts? And that's like on the smaller levels, maybe your county, start there.
That's actually one of my friends. They joked locally when I got to my smaller town, because I moved from a big city to a smaller city, right? Said, everybody knows you stuff. And I'm like, I got to get in front of people because they're going to understand that I'm about to change things. And so they call me street royalty. 0% do I want to be street royalty, but that's what my friends still joke. And they're like, it's Stephanie street royalty. Because they're like, hey, Steph. And I'm doing that with local lawmakers, local people that understand that I came in with a mission. Do you feel like people are responding more readily to like professional recognition or public protection in that space? Because as someone who does now have to bend the ears of people locally, and there are regulations in place in my state, there was an administrative oversight. And so I have to find a lobbyist who understands that like that administrative oversight is like basically the thing we have to push and correct because we're that close to licensure. You know what I mean?
Well, my son calls it being hood famous.
Hood.
But I mean, I do think, it does help when you start talking to a lot of people and that you have that cred, the hood famous cred, as Caleb says.
Oh, I'm so here for this, Caleb.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the more people you talk to, the more doors open, the more people know who you are, the more people you can get in your corner. It goes a long way, to spreading the word that what we do matters, and what we do needs to have some kind of guidance, regulation, not necessarily again law, but we need something. And the people that teach what we do need to have some kind of accountability, not just, oh, geez, I've been an electrologist for 5 years and I took the CPE test. I mean, I don't think that's good enough.
No. As much as I respect the exam, because I do, I mean, like there's a lot of hard work that goes into the exam. As someone that's gotten to test right for it, I believe that they're doing right by that. But there's no way to gauge just because you're good at reading a study guide and retaining that information, whether or not you're up to date on standards from megahertz change to modalities to infection prevention, like to understanding positioning techniques and understand the diverse bodies that we're working on, that kind of stuff. There's none of that. And that's the part that's scaring a lot of the public right now, is like, because the public, unless it's people who are desperate for hair removal, okay, and when I say desperate, they can't find a provider near them, going back to the fact that if there's no school, you can't find a provider near you because it's hard to get a provider, right?
Right.
Then they think I can just do this by watching a YouTube video. And as much as I want to see your guys' content out there, I also know that there's somebody taking that content and watching your filament go into a follicle and buying their machine off eBay. What's stopping people in that moment? And that's scary. So I feel like when I think about it, it's a mixture of course, like professional recognition, like they got to know who we are, right? But that public protection factor, once you start talking to lawmakers, even in a local space, I literally keep burned images in my phone that are not mine to show them what can happen when things like us don't exist. I feel bad because I feel like I'm like tattletaling, be like, see, like people suck sometimes. And like, that's not the goal, right? Like, but like at the same time, it is like, hey, this does happen sometimes. We are literally putting alternating current and direct current into a follicle. And we're doing this in a way that should be balanced energy, but doesn't always come with balance. If a state wanted to take a realistic first step tomorrow, okay, and I'm looking at you, Robin. If they want to take a first step tomorrow, what's the initial ask that you think would be, or initially, what should it actually look like? Who's the first person you think someone should talk to?
I think probably somebody in the Consumer Protection Agency, or in the health department, one of the two places.
Yep. Mine was health department. I was like, once I had to be the expert witness on that thing, I was like, I know where to go. Health department was for me. Because there's people out here that do train, but they train 2-day sessions and award 800 hours. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, that's not how math works. And I'm not even good at math. Like, okay. So thinking of Maryland as a case study, I know I'm rapid firing questions at her, but I was so excited when I got that document. And you guys are still getting the whole thing. You walk into a room with regulators in an unregulated state. How do you use Maryland as concrete example rather than a theoretical argument?
Well, I think because we have the educational framework, we have licensure,
Okay.
we have documented we have the examiners, our state board. I've put out, 14 licensed electrologists now. I've, knock on, find me some wood.
Mhm.
Passed. Nobody's had to retake anything. I think that if they are very prepared to enter the workforce, then they're going to do fine.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be. I do think that the supervised clinical practice is huge. You see on Facebook where people say, well, how can I do this without, traveling, to learn how to do it? Well, you can't. You're going to have to go somewhere. And if you can't go, and all of us schools, we're flexible.
Yes.
You work with people. So you come for a week and then you have to take a month off. And then you come back for 2 weeks and then you take 2 weeks off. I mean, we want you to get done. And ideally you do it boom, boom, boom. But if that doesn't work for you, I mean, people have jobs, they have families, they have lives. I get it.
Mhm.
If you can just spend the time, to work out some kind of schedule to do it, then it can be done.
Mhm.
But you can't just say, I can't learn this in a weekend. It just doesn't work that way. Even people with aesthetics background that already have the background in skin, you can't do electrolysis in a weekend, just having an aesthetics background. And nurses, the same thing. I mean, I've had a couple nurses come through now and having to try to retrain them to do an insertion and not an injection.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
I mean, it's like holy cannoli. So, there is a learning curve, and it takes time. It's a finesse. You've got to really practice it. It's an art.
It's an art. And it's an art. It reminds me, one time I liked doing yoga. Okay. And I remember someone saying to me, I'm like, I'm so bad at this. I'm not saying I'm good at it, but I enjoy it. Okay. I'm like, I'm so bad at that. They call it yoga practice for a reason. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, every time you go to yoga, it's an opportunity for you to do better than the last time you were in there. Electrology practice, electrolysis practice, electrology study. I know. Electrolysis practice, that is what you are. You are practicing that skill set day in and day out, which is why I don't know about you guys, but sometimes when you have taken a month off or a couple weeks off, I always joke and apologize to my first client because I'm like, give me a second. I need to warm up my hands. I need to get the motion before I'm actually applying the current because I want to make sure that that's a fine motor skill that you're not doing anywhere typically else unless you're doing like fine beadwork or needle crafts, that kind of stuff.
Right. Right.
Estheticians and nurses, I hope that when you guys hear this, it's not that we're saying that you're uneducated in that space, but honestly, working on top of the skin, okay, or probing into an open follicle are two vastly different things. Nurses, we do not puncture a follicle to get to the structures that we're trying to destroy. We actually go in and we thread in that space. So you aren't going in, it's like putting a catheter in. You're not going in to a spot that you have to break the skin. You're going into a spot that's already open. And it is, while you might understand systems of the body better if you came from RN, or you might understand the layers of your dermal layers, right? You still haven't hyper focused on a hair follicle.
Right.
And that's really what it comes into. So what do lawmakers and health departments, I already said that one. Just kidding. What elements of Maryland structure, the nursing oversight, the higher education approval, practice committees, do you feel are most persuasive and then most persuasive to other states? Where do you think that when we talked about focusing first on the health department, okay,
Mhm.
in that spot, what elements of the structure you guys currently have do you feel holds the most weight? I know that when we submit for CEUs for your state, we do have to do a little bit extra
Yeah.
good extra work, but it is extra work. What did you have to do?
Um, as far as you mean, as far as getting continuing education approved?
Using it as a case study, like
Oh,
using
case study.
Maryland, like
Oh,
the Maryland structure, the nursing oversight, the higher education approval,
I
practice
think
committees. Do you feel it was evenly balanced?
I do. And I also think that it's a bonus for insurance companies, like because we did all this legwork. And so when I went to the insurance company, um, all I had to do was tell them that I was approved by the state board.
Okay.
And they, because I also had to provide a bond to cover the cost of tuition for my students
Yeah.
should something happen. So, that's something that the insurance companies don't, they don't give that lightly. I mean, I paid for it, but they still, you have to provide some kind of financial guarantee so that if, something happens, your students can get their tuition back if a school closes. So I think that having all of that in place was good. It was a good foundation for me to say to the insurance company, "Hey, I need this.
Mm,
Can you please help me?"
that's good. You guys, just so everybody knows, I'm actually starting to feel really like calm in my heart in this space because a lot of these things that I thought that I was like so far behind on it, right? I am, you're seeing me in my brain check off little boxes as well because those are all things I had to do because I had to do that for the state of Oregon because that's where we got our first reciprocity for with our ECC, the higher education board there. In Washington, you can operate as an apprenticeship initially, which is why my program's length was established at such a long time frame initially. And I kind of pulled it back in, and then there's mentorship now as that program lengthened differently. But I had to go through what's called the WTB, so the Washington Workforce Education Training Board, okay, which is your higher education board for you guys. Ours is focused on that particular one. It's not just for trades. It's pretty much anybody that would end up on Career Bridge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I did not go through an electrology space, an aesthetic space, a nursing space initially. And those are my next steps is like, who do we align ourselves with going forward? Because in the state of Oregon, they are licensed underneath electrology and body art practitioners in that space, but with the Oregon Health Licensing Office. So they are through the health licensing board there, which means that we'd have to do something similar here because I already have that framework that I had to follow all those there. So that's really cool to hear. Okay, so when we think about who to approach, so you were very clear about legislators should not be the first stop. We have our agencies to first talk to, so like that would be your health board, public health, or public safety. Do you think that it will serve us better and how we talk about electrolysis? For example, like framing electrolysis as a procedure like that involves instead of like penetrating the skin, puncturing the skin,
Mm-hmm.
probing a follicle, or that they understand that like skin penetration, electricity, infection risk. When we use those terms in there, why do you feel as though that framework and how we talk about it is so important? And if it should be consistent from state to state in general?
I mean, I do think consistency matters. And I also think that given the potential for the stuff that can go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
aligning our language in a medical or health type vocabulary can only benefit us. I mean, it doesn't have to, like you said, we don't have to say puncture. We don't have to say, you know, microsurgery. We don't have to say that, but if we can come up with some kind of terminology that still gets our point across, but in a, you know, in that medical slash health format, I think it would go a long way for, you know, bringing us all together on one page.
Agreed. I mean, when I think about like, because there's groups out there or organizations like that we have to like obviously work with. Whether you're a Society of Clinical and Medical Hair Removal, an AEA. Back in the day, I don't know where it went, but Trudy's group, the Guild,
Yeah, the Guild.
the Guild, what was the International Guild of Electrology?
National Guild of
Okay.
Electrologists or something like that.
Yeah, like those groups. I think that like there's a benefit for us obviously having a national nonprofit like the AEA or SHMER, Society of Clinical Medical Hair Removal, that has given us terminology. They've worked with the CDC. They have guidelines in place for infection prevention standards. Do you think that it benefits us to have that with a national organization, one, as because the national organization that we have as our gold standard, AEA, is who worked with the CDC on the infection prevention. Okay.
Yep.
But I also think that that limits, because if people can't become a member because of the access to education issues, and we're trying to pull us out of that space, do you think that that is beneficial to keep that conversation happening within one organization? Or should we be avoiding organizations early on because it seems that there's a strategy issue here. So like, what would be the strategic reason for us to maybe pull ourselves out of like being so hyper-focused in one organization to say that that's the gold standard when not everybody can get in there because of that education access issue?
Right.
Especially with that stuff recently changing. I mean,
the one thing is that they do have the infection prevention standards. I mean,
yeah,
that is the standard for our industry.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't see that happening any other place. At least not to that level, and that it's not updated regularly any other place. And like our states, many states that have regulations either adopt the AEA standards or they have their own. And like for Maryland, because we were the first ones to adopt back then we called it infection control standards. And then the AEA adopted it. I only know that is because my mom was one of the first two people that did that. So, you know, it takes, like I said before, it takes a while for the state to update regulations. And because they're part of our regulations, when infection prevention type stuff changes, it does take a while for them to catch up. And so having a state adopt just the AEA standards as they are so that they can automatically be updated, I think is not a bad thing. I also think that the more states that have some sort of regulations, and again, not necessarily licensure, but it might help with reciprocity for the states that do have licensure. You know, if we're all kind of following the same thing anyway, then, you know, say I decide to retire and I'm going to move to the beach in Delaware. So I can get a license, which I've actually already done, but, you know, that's another story. But I got a license by reciprocity in Delaware. If I do when I decide to retire to the beach, then I can work there. And Delaware is interesting. You can be in school and before you take your licensure exam, you can be sponsored by a licensed electrologist and work under them
Oh,
as like a pre-licensed person before you get your license.
kind of like when a nursing student goes and shadows a doctor and works with a doctor before they're done with nursing school.
Yes.
That's actually a great, I mean, that's a great idea. And I'm with you on the EA portion. The only reason I ask is because people ask me, right? And so these are the questions that like sometimes will happen in my classroom. And I'm like, here's the deal. What's beneficial? Here's the things that are beautiful about my state right now. I have regulations in place that people should be following. Problem is nobody knows about those regulations, and that's the issue in that space. Okay. So when I'm like, no, there's regulations in our state. We are a regulated state. We're not a licensed state, but we are regulated. And we're a state that has an association that is an affiliate of the National Organization for AEA. And so when we think about that, we have everything set up for them just to be like, oh, whoops. And then all of a sudden regulations become licenses, and then you just have to keep that up, right? There's even regulations on education. In my state, technically, anything less than a 48-hour like program can be a certificate program, like where you're just like, oh, I went for a weekend training, right? But you can't provide someone a career in that 48 hours because of the regulations in place without being either someone that is certified and or licensed training that person and them apprenticing for you, or them being in a space where it's like you have a 2-day maybe hands-on training once a month, but you got to be able over time, they're still a student. Like they still have to get that. Right now, some of my students are in my program in this last year. They were all electrologists. They were trained by people that can't even sit for one certification test. That is hard. And it's hard to say, I know, and I'm really sorry that you have to go back to school to do this. But at the same time, it is for a reason so that somebody can't do bad
Right.
under the guise of professional.
Yeah. And I just saw Michaela said that was Massachusetts has 1,100 hours requirement. You guys also can do laser in Massachusetts too, right? Is that why it's 1,100 hours, or is it all electrolysis?
Oh, that's a good follow up. Yeah, because we got to know, Michaela, and you're free to.
It's all
electrolysis. God, that's the dream. Just so everybody knows, I know 600 hours is people get proficient to a point. But if I could do longer, be more like an associate's program for electrologists, I just feel like we would change the future for our students. I just know it. That's wild though. So national minimum education framework. So you proposed this in your paper, and I was like, I like this. So you proposed a national minimum education framework without immediately pushing the licensure. Okay. Which it solves the problem of the baseline being hit. Do you think on a national level, the 320 hours that we got initially, because we're both licensed electrologists with initial 320, okay? But we went back and did the extra work so that we could get that license, right?
Right.
This season, Electrolysis Unplugged is spotlighting our groundbreaking research project. We're working to bring legitimacy, data, and recognition back to electrology. If you're a practitioner ready to contribute detailed charting and client outcomes, or a student interested in learning the process, visit electrologycoalition.com, look under research, and get involved today. Together, we're writing the future of electrolysis.
Do you think that 320 is enough, or do you think there should be a minimum of hands-on that we should be hitting?
I think 400 is better. I mean, when I came out at 320, I went to work with my mom. My mom handpicked my clients the first 6 months. She only gave me the easy ones. And I'm glad she only gave me the easy ones. I needed to ease myself into the hard ones.
Yeah.
And so I think an extra 80 hours of insertion practice, an extra 2 full weeks, or even a month of just give me some hard chins, some, ingrown hairs. I just feel like when you are starting in your practice, you're going to see so much more of that than you see, look at those great leg hairs. There's, they're just
Right.
flying right out, or the arm hairs or the underarm hairs who fly right out.
Right.
You want some challenges, and that's what I'm trying to give to my students. We've got some people who, have big time ingrowns. We have a couple of gender affirming care clients that come in. I want them to have as much of a real world experience in the school as they would in the office. And I just feel like when I say we, just educators in general, do students a disservice if they're not going to try to give them as much of the hard stuff as possible.
Agreed. I don't want to give you 2x4s that are juicy. I want to give you dehydrated skin. I want to give you peach fuzz that's hard to see. I want to give you the person who's had distorted hair follicles that are growing from the depths of their soul, right? That are harder to go after. I want to give you the client that's not necessarily, I know it sounds harsh to say this, but I want to give you the client that's not necessarily the easy person to work with. They're a particular client, and everything that you do comes into question because you will come across that.
Mm-hmm,
and it's not bad to be questioned, or it is bad when someone doesn't trust you. But if you have the answers, or you're willing to say, you know what, I don't have the answer. Let me go talk to my electrology friends.
Mm-hmm.
And then boom, you have it. That's what I want to see.
Right.
Michaela just said in 2016, oh, wow. Going back to the training portion, in 2016, we added laser and IPL hair removal to the license, their license and curriculum, but it's on average just 30 hours.
Wow.
And that's actually why when my state said, no, actually, we want you to go back to school, even after 20 years of doing laser, they're like, we want you to go back to school and do like the master aesthetics program. I was like, if I'm going to be teaching this, I get that, right? Because my initial one, 40 hours was what your didactic versus your theory was way different in that space. But I would say that it made sense. Now, it's weird to a lot of people that I'm willing to just go and branch off because they're like, but you're successful in what you're doing. And I'm like, yeah, right. But I want to be able to do more and I want to do it legitimately.
Mm-hmm.
So that's wild that it's only 30 hours because that is in the laser world, it should be at minimum 40 hours per service that you're getting certified for of that time. And that's that's a week of focus in each one. I think about that for electrolysis too. When you guys ask me what's the minimum, I was about to tell her that my minimum is 400 hours because a 400-hour program, that's 200 hours of hands-on, 200 hours of theory. Okay. Mm-hmm. 200 hours of hands-on, 40 hours a week is what, 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay? Week 1 is chaos in school. Yeah. Okay. It's stress, it's tears, it's a lot of things, right? It's a lot of did I make the best decision of my life or the worst decision of my life? Okay. Mm-hmm. Week 2, that's your focus in galvanic. Then you're going, manual thermolysis, blend, flash thermolysis. And then you're getting to have student choice moments. And it doesn't mean that the entire time of that next week is going to be in that one modality. But my minimum requirements, when we were talking about this earlier, so for 400 hours of hands-on, the state of Oregon requires you to have 400 procedures, and those 400 procedures are divided up as 12 observation, 20 galvanic, 46 manual thermolysis, flash thermolysis, 46, blend, 46, and then 230 student procedures. A procedure equals 15 minutes, okay? So if I have a 4-hour person on the table, I can go between all of those modalities, right? And spend a little bit each time and knock them out, right? But one 15-minute procedure per 1 hour of education time to try all the different modalities and feel proficient in it, it's not a lot.
No, it's not. And that's the thing. I think Sue asked about how we work out the in-person hours. Mm-hmm. So the way my school works is that while the in-person is 400 hours, mm-hmm. it's not 400 insertion hours. Mm. It's 250 insertion hours.
Correct.
And how I work it is that I still haven't switched to do galvanic first, but I'm working on that with the next group. It's going to go galvanic first. They start with they start just doing insertions on themselves.
Yep.
And I've gotten brave. I know I'm a wimp, but I've gotten brave, and now I have decided that the first practical is going to be on me. I feel like if I don't jump, then we're good. So, but I have decided that they really need to work on themselves, and I don't care if it hurts them. I care if it hurts me, but I don't care if it hurts them.
So real. Just so everybody knows. Thank you.
No, but I do feel like they really need to understand, especially if they've never had electrolysis before. Because I have some students who have never had electrolysis before. Maybe their mom had it, or their mom's.
They watched a TikTok and they're like, "This is really cool."
Yes. And so if they don't know what it's supposed to feel like or not feel, then they're really not going to understand, the proper way to do it. And then, of course, we all have clients that feel nothing.
Oh, yeah.
And so some of the models that, that come in, they feel nothing, and they're not going to tell you that they feel anything. And so that's why working on themselves or each other or me now is going to be like the first level. And if once they get past that, then they can start moving on to other people. But we document everybody's insertion hours. We have this humongous spreadsheet broken down by modality, which epilator they're using, because they got to practice on all the epilators. Even though I do gravitate towards one of the three that we have in the school, but that's okay. But I think the other thing is that all the schools are kind of different in how they approach this. And there are schools that don't really have the foundation that our schools do. And so I think you get unqualified trainers, or trainers that maybe are not as qualified as they could be. Let's put it that way. And so, maybe they're only being taught thermolysis, or maybe they're only being taught using one size probe, because I've seen that happen.
Yeah. The stuff that we're hearing and seeing in the industry, it's frustrating because it's like, when Sue asked about like how many hours, like if the 250, that's what that equals out to, the per teachers. They say in the past, filament to follicle is about 3 to 5 hours of your 8-hour school day. After your first couple weeks, it was like the past. I don't really know if that's still the standard. I would have to like start having us all kind of look at that and like measure it, just like how we're doing with the research project. It's like, okay, what is that ratio there? Yeah. I feel like it's pretty standard. There are things that when my students don't have something to do, I have, not measured. There's no, what? I'm going to come back to that comment here in a second. I have, because of the museum and because of all of the awesome things you guys have donated to the museum for people to be able to enjoy when they come here. We're in the process of digitizing our entire hair root, the international hair root magazine, that kind of stuff. We're digitizing all that, and we're making a portal for people to like basically have a library membership to, all that stuff. But my students have access to that. And if they aren't doing something that is filament and a follicle or a project they have to finish, they actually have additional projects like writing papers now. I have arts and crafts upstairs for them to make me a hair follicle model that mirrors the one they got in their student kit. Okay. And explain to me what that is. It's like, we're having to do these things because there is stuff that you guys do need to learn outside of filament to follicle that sometimes you have to be in front of a person to do so. But in that same space, there's going to be times where I would love to have someone filament to follicle for 400 hours, of course. Yeah. Of that if I could make you busy the entire time, or at least 395 hours so we can get through those first 5 hours of school that are like absolutely like, I want you to put a filament in your follicle. I don't care if it's uncomfortable because I've done it myself. I also know it's uncomfortable. Okay. I don't dig having electrolysis done on myself. It's not like I'm like skipping into the office excited about it. But at the same time, I also love the results I got, and I can handle it to a point. You can't describe what electrolysis sensation is like to you if you haven't experienced that and been able to say to somebody, for example, if you and I were chatting and you're like, hey, like which modality hurts you most? I actually have different modalities that hurt different parts of my body because I receive discomfort differently in those parts of my body, right? And so you need to be able to do those things. When you talk about one filament size, one material size, one modality, I'm like, if all you had access to was that, and you still had that for 400 hours, we can teach you modalities later on, okay? We can teach you the benefits of sizing your filament to the follicles in front of you in time, for shorter periods of time. But you have to ask yourself, do I really want to be like what, the one trick pony? Like, this is all I do?
Right.
Or do I want to walk into something and be like, okay, I might love to do this modality. And like you said before, you get your one machine that you love. Same, right? But in that same space, when people ask me what's the best machine, honestly, the one that you enjoy the most, that you can bend to the will that you want it to bend to, so that when someone walks into your office, you can make that thing sing the best opera of hair removal ever. I feel like that's what we're going to do. I know that we're like coming down on our time. And I also told her at the beginning of this, before you guys popped on, that I was going to bug her later on and be like, let's do this more, because we have more to say about this. And I do want to go to this thing. It said, Sue said that school hands-on did not measure like time in a follicle. It was depending on the student, and there was different hands-on time. Depending on the size of the program, there might be different hands-on time, but it should be measured. So you should be turning in some type of curriculum to say, like, not curriculum, some type of chart. Because how do I measure your metrics without like,
I honestly don't remember 32 years ago, 33 years ago, what we did, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know that there were like 3 of us in a room with one model and one machine, and we took turns.
oh, wow.
But it took a whole year. I mean, like it was, and again, it was only 320 hours, but it took like the whole year to do it. But I just don't really remember exactly what we did back then.
Yeah, I mean,
That was many brain cells ago.
many brains. It's like I remember, but you know, and my mom did a great job teaching me, and in the same space that there was no formal instruction.
Right.
I joke, and I'm serious about this. My formal instruction, I don't even know how many hours of theory I had, you guys. I sat underneath her treatment table playing with Barbies, listening to hair removal talked about all day long, with her sheet over the top of the table as my little Barbie fortress. And my Barbies were playing hair removal underneath because that's what I was hearing all day, right? And so why did I get good at consultations? Because I heard my mom give consult after consult after consult after consult. And so my education, and I'm very happy where I'm at. So I always want more. If I could be a forever student, I would be. Because I like to learn. Okay.
Mhm.
But I think lunch was quick. No breaks. Lunch was quick. What does this say? School was super busy. 11 schoolmates for Robin. No breaks, and lunch was super quick. Yeah, you better hoover that into your face in that moment. And mine was like, it was more laissez-faire, but like it worked to what I expected at the time. And then my mom's like, if you want to do this, you better do, and then told me all the things I can go after. And so my standard was set high because we understood that we had something taken away from us in our state. And that's why honestly, I am passionate about this for every state, because I don't think we're going away. I think that we might evolve, and how education happens is going to evolve and that kind of stuff. Electrolysis has stood 150 years? 150 years. We have not changed to a point where it's unrecognizable from the initial stuff other than the machine's aesthetic, right? But what we have changed is how we understand the body.
Mhm.
And I hope to see that change. I want one, thank you for being on tonight, because I'm excited for this next part 2 of this conversation. I don't know when I'm going to bug her later on for it. But it'll be soon, because I don't want to keep you guys in limbo, because I feel like you guys also enjoy these moments. But thank you for this, because it's like,
Well, I mean, I think, just by being here, we are all committed to, going the extra step, and we all want to learn more, and what better way to do it than together.
absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yes. Together. That's huge. Is that going to be like on a shirt somewhere? Let's do it. Let's go. All right, team. So I know we're at the end of this. I almost treated you guys like my zaplings, and I was going to be like, okay, code word for today. If you haven't been live here live, you don't have to worry about code words. Okay. But this was awesome. So thanks for being here on the first mentorship hour back to 2026. That's wild. So Happy New Year, everybody. Excited to see you guys.
Happy New Year.
All right. Until next time. Thank you, girl.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Well, with that, I hope that there's one thing I hope listeners can take away from this conversation is that regulation does not have to be punitive. The standards don't have to be exclusionary. Electrology is permanent. It can be an invasive procedure. It involves probing the skin, electrical application, infection risk, and once we acknowledge that reality, it becomes clear that education cannot be casual, and instructors can't be unqualified. Minimum education, educator standards, they aren't about gatekeeping. They're about public protection, professional credibility, and long-term sustainability. They're also what makes access possible, because legitimacy is what opens the door to accreditation, funding, and real educational choice. The future of electrology isn't about defending what we do, it's about defining it. It's clarity, it's responsibly, in a way that protects both clients and practitioners. This conversation is only the beginning, but it's an important one. Thank you for being willing to engage with it. And happy 2026. We'll see you next week.